Tom Scavetta, our good buddy from Review and Preview and co-host of Big Blue Avenue, along with Hank, joined us earlier to preview the New York Football Giants and how they're going to do in 2022. Well, as we've been talking about on the show, the NFL is back. First game of the season starts on Thursday, and for most of the rest of the league, it begins on Sunday, including our New York Football Giants. And here to preview the Giants season, looking back at the offseason, looking ahead here to the season, is our good buddy from Review and Preview and Big Blue Avenue, and that is Tom Scavetta. Tell him, welcome back. How are you, bud?
How's it going, gents? Thanks very much for having me. Excited to talk about some New York Football Giants as week one is just several days away at this point. I'm pumped. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, it's been quite the off season for us. The transfer over to Brian Dable and Joe Shane, and I've said on the show, and I know you and I agree on this. I think considering the situation that they were both put into, I think for the most part they've had a pretty good off season shape going into this season. So, what would you? Looking back at the draft, I know that's when last time we had you on was about the draft, but looking now back at the draft and now looking into the season, how would you rate their off season so far?
I would still, again, it's tough, right? Because they haven't set foot on the field yet as far as regular season goes. From what I've seen in preseason, the offense has done a complete 180. Offensive line gave up the least amount of pressures in the preseason in the NFC. So that's a good thing right there. I think the pieces that they added, not just in free agency and the draft, from then until now, I would still give it an A minus. Again, Shane had his hands tied because of the situation that Dave Gettleman left the Giants in. And as of today, or yesterday, that is, the Giants were still $4.6 million over the cap. And, trying to move pieces, shuffle things around. Joe Shane's doing a great job with what he can. So I give him props for what he's done. And, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things to look at going to the season. I think, number one, the biggest thing that you look at going into the season is the quarterback. Daniel Jones is a guy that's been talked about a lot because of where he was drafted and stuff. But this is now going to be the fourth different coordinator, third different coach. Fourth offensive coordinator, third head coach. We've seen with like Baker Mayfield. He's gone through a lot of transformation in that regard too. So, fourth different coordinator, third head coach. I mean, it's weird because you're heading into possibly his last year, and you still really don't know about him.
Yeah, and it's sad. Hank and I have discussed on Big Blue Avenue how, Daniel Jones has been given a real raw end of the deal. For me, though, he does have a lot of injury issues despite the coaching changes that have been made over the past several years. And, you're starting to run out of excuses at this point. If he can't stay on the football field, then you can't pay him long term. I think what Daniel Jones is playing for this year is a franchise tag next year. Ultimately, that's what I think he's playing for. It's going to take more than one season to decide if he's worth a long-term extension or not. I think both you and I agree with that because the Giants are probably not going to have a 500 or above record this year, but you never know. I do think this team will overachieve, and I think Daniel Jones has looked impressive in the preseason, and people might not like to hear this. When Daniel Jones is fully healthy, he's a top 20 quarterback in the NFL without a doubt. He has one of the best deep balls in the NFL. He's mobile. He's the type of modern QB that you want. He's had so many things working against him, and it comes to a matter of fact, if he can stay on the football field, he can reach great potential in the NFL. I don't think he'll ever be elite, but you want Daniel Jones eventually to fall within that top 10 to top 15 range of quarterbacks in order to feel comfortable with moving with him in the future.
Yeah, and Hank, I'll throw this to you too because Hank's like our Venn diagram in all this because Hank is with me and is with you also on Big Blue Avenues on Thursdays on the Review and Preview Sports Network. Daniel Jones, to me, if he was healthy and in the right team and the right system, I think can be successful.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, now whether I think he's elite or not, that is something that's very much debatable. I am leaning towards no in that department. But with that having been said, Tom and I have watched numerous bits of game film on Daniel Jones, and the one conclusion that we pretty much came to is the talent is there. Like, he can throw the deep ball, especially like when he's like in the pocket and he's got like all the time in the world to throw. Like, the clips are there. You just have to dig really deep and watch them. I think the problem can be associated with like the decision making. But however, with that being said, if you also have watched enough Giants football like you and I have, you would also know that, he has definitely been screwed. And Dave Gettleman, who I think we all know we can agree with, are very relieved is no longer there, did not do him any favors. Okay, maybe you can give him credit for Andrew Thomas, but that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is he has not been given a fair shake, and he is now going through his third coach already in, only his fourth seasons. That's not ideal. That definitely not ideal at all. Now, again, can he thrive under Brian Daboll? I'm thinking maybe. I have a little bit of flashbacks with Jim Fossil being hired. Granted, I know this was like sort of before my time. I was in diapers when he was coaching the Giants, but like him being hired and, sort of helping out the Giants offense, even though unfortunately he wasn't successful in helping out a certain other Duke alumni quarterback at that position. But yeah, I definitely think that Daniel Jones has the potential, but ultimately at the end of the day, and Tom, I know you're probably not going to like hearing me saying this, I unfortunately feel like the Giants are going to be at a point where they're going to be moving on from Daniel Jones simply because the NFL is a quarterback's game and they need him to take giant steps moving forward. And no, I did not mean to make a pun out of that.
No, definitely. And I will just say one thing here too. And this is where this year I think is going to be relevant. I mean, they're going to struggle this year, I think, but in some ways this year is going to be relevant throughout because you're going to try and figure out, is Jones going to be your guy going forward? And the truth of the matter is, if you still have question marks with Jones at the end of this year, then he can't be the answer. That's
right.
What I think is the problem. And then one of the other problems I think the Giants run into is, and I know I might get all over the map here, but I think the Giants are actually good enough where they're not going to be among the worst teams in the league this year. I think they're going to actually sneak out a couple of more wins than they did last year because of the schedule and because of the fact that I think they're going to, with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane there, I think they're going to find a couple of ways to get a few more wins out of it. So maybe they're not going to be picking in the top like 5 heading into the draft next year. And I know next year they're talking already is a big quarterbacks draft, but that could be something else you're running into as well. But, one of the other facets, speaking of offense, receiving core, that's been another thing that's been talked about. Whether it's been the questions with Darius Slayton or dare I say the big question regarding Kenny Galladay. Tom, receiving core, Jones, he needs the offensive line, of course. He's got Saquon Barkley, who hopefully can play a full season, but who's he going to be really throwing the ball to this year is going to be the question too.
It's a big question, and I think Daniel Jones has a mouthful of options. He has Sterling Shepard back healthy, which is great news. Kadarius Toney rumored to be ready for Week 1, which is great. The Giants have spent the last 2 years drafting a receiver in the first 2 rounds. They got Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky. David Sills finally makes the 53-man roster after 4 years of hard work. David Sills is the 9th longest tenured Giant, by the way. I think you two might want to know that. That's how much turnover there's been on this roster. But he's been a pure connection with Daniel Jones. And outside of Sills and Galladay, Darius Slayton is the only receiver on this offense that could go over the top. Everyone else is an intermediate to short route runner and plays that slot receiver type of role. Granted, why Alex Bachman wound up not making this roster and why I don't think people were too justified to make claims that, he should have made it, because there were players that have very similar game to him better than him at that position, as much as I like the guy. Daniel Bellinger is an interesting prospect as well at tight end. This is a guy who came out of San Diego State in the 4th round, rookie, a guy who doesn't drop passes, despite the one he did drop in the preseason. But I think him and Jones are going to develop chemistry over time. The real question, in my opinion, is the health of these receivers. And it's a shame. It seems like every position unit we talk about, guys, the biggest question is health, whether it's quarterback, running back, wide receiver. Nobody is durable on this football team anymore. And I think out of all the receivers, I mean, David Sills is the only one that doesn't really have too big of an injury history. So I think Darius Slayton staying is great financially wise. No, but people say, oh, you're paying your wide receiver $2.5 million. But you're not just going to give him up for nothing when you have all these players ahead of him hurt, right? And the same thing goes for Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay has the best hands out of the wide receiving core, despite how many passes he's dropped and this and that. It's a chemistry thing with Daniel Jones. It's not a skill thing. It's a chemistry thing. And once he gets that chemistry down packed with Daniel Jones, he will have a really good season, in my opinion. A little different opinion than what most people are saying. And I think when you have 5 receivers that can go out and ball every Sunday, a reliable tight end who doesn't have stone hands, and a running back who is pretty much earth, wind, and fire himself in this offense, I think it gives him plenty of weapons to throw to at the end of the day. And I'd expect Daniel Jones to be just fine running this offense. And the only question is, will it be enough for him to stay on the team?
Yeah, definitely. I really completely agree with that. And I think emphasis needs to be made on the point about Giants and, staying healthy, because let's face it, like, one of the biggest things I've been talking to both of you guys about, like, with regards to the Giants, is they can never seem to catch a break with regards to health. However, with that being said, I would also say we dodged a major bullet when it was revealed that Kayvon Thibodeaux's injury wasn't as serious as initially thought. And I believe he's only going to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's only going to be missing week 1 and week 2. No? And
nope, he should be ready for week 1.
Oh, perfect.
That would be incredible. I mean, I know they were talking possibly week 1, but I mean, if he's out there on against the Titans, who I'm not high on at all this year,
that would be huge.
Yeah, I'm not high on the Titans at all this year. Real quick, before we get to the defense, and we're talking with Tom Scavetta here on the show. Tom, what's your thoughts about Saquon Barkley? I think because of the salary cap situation the Giants were in, I think one of their biggest losses was not being able to bring back Devontae Booker, even if it was only at a $2.5 million deal. Booker was actually one of their better offensive players last year. Now, maybe that's not speaking much, but, the fact they weren't able to bring him back, and, Barkley, another player that's, been talked about a lot here with the Giants, and health. Again, we're two things in one here. What's your thoughts about Barkley as we go into the season?
My thoughts about Barkley, pretty positive, actually, because this is the best he's looked physically wise, right? Mm-hmm. It's over a year now since he's been recovered from the ACL tear. And I think the goal is to get a 1,000-yard season out of him. And I think the fact that they added pieces up front will benefit Saquon Barkley, right? They added Mark Lewinsky and John Feliciano in free agency, and then drafted Evan Neal at right tackle. So that entire right side of the line is improved. If you go back to week 18 of last year and look at the starters at center, right guard, and right tackle, none of them are on an NFL roster. So that just goes to show you that the offensive line is improved. Saquon Barkley will also be improved. Not saying that Saquon is a product of the offensive line, but every running back can't have success if they don't have a good offensive line, right? That's why it's a team sport at the end of the day. And I think Saquon will be a threat out of the backfield as well, passing game, catching passes, running the football. Outside zone runs seem to be his forte. And he does have elite quickness once he gets in open space. So I think his strength and his durability are the two biggest cogs of the season. They want to, fold in together and make sure they get the most out of Saquon. But I do expect a 1,000-yard season from him because of who the Giants have put in place offensively. Brian Dable, coming from a winning organization. Mike Kafka, winning organization in the Kansas City Chiefs. Shea Tierney, the quarterback's coach. DeAndre Smith, the running backs coach, coming from college. So all of these things considered, guys, Saquon is bound to have not maybe a 2018, but somewhere close to that range where you feel comfortable enough saying, hey, his value is not immense. Maybe bring him back on a 2-year deal, right? It's something you could think about. So I think Saquon's going to have a good season. I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5 running back, but I do think he's going to start the trend back to what he once was.
Oh, that would be awesome. Hank?
Yeah, no, Saquon is definitely one of the Giants that, I would say I'm probably just as skeptical about Saquon Barkley, but with all of that in mind, with a better coaching staff and a better offensive line, I definitely think he has the potential to have an improved season. And Tom, I think your 1,000-yard goal seems pretty realistic. And yeah, I don't really think necessarily he's going to reach that elite level. I think the more I think about it, I think 2018 was probably the year where he may have peaked, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think the Giants can, never get any good production out of Saquon Barkley again. I think far from it. I think you'll have him have, a little bit of a comeback season. And, as you guys alluded to, I think the coaching staff and the improvement of the offensive line is definitely going to be an important figure in that department. Now, what happens in free agency, I think that's definitely going to remain to be seen, but hopefully, yeah, I would definitely love to have him back within the coming years, so long as it's at a reasonable deal.
Absolutely. Now, turning to the defense here, defense has undergone some changes too. Drafting Kayvon Thibodeaux, they lost Bradbury, they lost Logan Ryan, Jabril Peppers, so they're gonna have a revamped defense. What do you think about that side of the ball, Tom?
The front 7, I love. The back 4 to 5, I don't. I think, quite frankly, the Giants will have one of the worst secondaries in football this year. Outside of Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson, there is absolutely no depth. I'm fine with Julian Love being that second starting safety, but after that, you're looking at a 4th-round rookie and a waiver wire claim. At corner, we've seen the struggles of Aaron Robinson. Darnay Holmes is a nice slot corner. I expect him to have a good year. You have Cordell Flott, who's a 3rd-round rookie. And then the 5th corner they kept on the initial roster, I believe, it wasn't Harrison Hind. It was Rodarius Williams, who's headed to short-term IR. So who the heck is going to be corner number 5? Remember, they kept only 8 defensive backs on the initial 53-man roster. And for a defense led by Wink Martindale, it's a blitzkrieg type of defense. You're going to war out there. You are rushing the passer pretty much every single play. That means you have to have good secondary players. Expect the Giants to give up a lot more deep plays this year than they did the last couple of years, but expect them to get more sacks, expect them to create more turnovers, expect their games to be higher scoring on both sides of the football. And I think it'll be interesting because you have Blake Martinez coming back off the torn ACL. You look at what the Giants have assembled. They kept 6 inside linebackers, which I actually agree with because we've seen some 4 inside linebacker sets, like guys like Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin as well, in addition to Tay Crowder and Micah McFadden. Shame that Darian Beavers tore his ACL. When you look at the edge rushing group, Quincy Roche on the practice squad, a little surprised by that because O'Shane Ximenez has not had a sack since 2019, so I don't love Ximenez on this roster, but everything else is fine. Kayvon and Aziz just need to stay healthy, and they're backed up with Jihad Ward, who's familiar with the wing scheme. They also have Ellerson Smith, and then you look at the defensive line, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Justin Ellis. The Giants are facing majority of the teams they're facing this year are run-heavy football teams, right? So you want to be able to stop the run. And that's why the Giants have shifted their focus towards stopping the run and not defending the pass as much, if that makes sense. So overall, I think the defense is going to take Not a major step back, but a minor step back from last year in pass coverage categories.
Tom, I think that's exactly why I think they have a very good chance this Sunday against in week 1 against the Titans. You know what? Because I'm not in love with the Titans. Their offensive line's in shambles. I don't trust. I don't trust Tannehill, and I think they're going to be playing a lot of low-scoring games down there in Tennessee this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go in there Sunday 4:25 Eastern and they can pull out a W down there in Tennessee. I really do. But and I do love, and that's one of the things also in the offseason. One of the moves I did like was the signing of Don Wink Martindale for 2 reasons. One, I liked what he did. What he did down there at Baltimore, and Hank knows I like him because of his nickname. Wink Martindale.
As
you know I had to bring a game show. To it. But so Tom and Hank, I'll even throw this question to you too. So truth be told, you factor all these in, all this together. What do you think overall? What do you think is the Giants' ceiling, and what do you think actually is going to end up being their record this year?
I am gonna go with. Gosh, I keep forgetting it's a 17-game season. I've been so used to the 16 games, and it's still a change that I don't like. But I'm gonna go with 6-11. And I know I don't mean to sound all pessimistic, Debbie Downer. Like, I think the Giants actually will, they'll show signs of improvement. I think from what I saw in preseason, from what it looks like, what they've done in the offseason, I think they're going to be a better coach team. However, with that being said, let's not kid ourselves. This is still a roster that's a bit flawed and still recovering from the mess that good old Dave Gettleman made, to borrow a term that my buddy Johnny to my left uses a lot. So I think definitely it'll be a step forward, but as they say, Rome was not built in a day. 6-11, but I would not be surprised if the Giants somehow stole maybe an extra win out there or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much my 2 cents.
Any given Sunday, right? Every year you're going to win games you're not supposed to. Look back at 2020 when the Giants went to Seattle with a backup quarterback. Who the hell thought Big Blue would win that game? That's when Joe Judge was at his finest, right? We haven't mentioned his name much on this show because, quite frankly, there were some good qualities about him as a head coach. And now you're looking at the team in 2022 saying, well, what's the ceiling for this team? I think the Giants could overperform record-wise this year because of exactly what Johnny mentioned, the schedule. The Giants finished in 4th place last year. Therefore, they're playing a 4th place schedule. The Giants could win on Sunday against Tennessee. I know that will technically be a week from Sunday, but or whenever the game is being played. But I think 7-10 is a realistic record, guys. I think 7 wins is very feasible for this football team. Again, ideal schedule, I'd say 5-12, 6-11, like what Hank is saying. But I could see them squeaking out another win or two. I think they're going to be a very competitive football team. And at the end of the day, floor, 5-12. Ceiling, 8-9, 9-8. But that's being optimistic. 7-10 is the realistic record for Big Blue this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think no matter what the record's going to be with the Giants this year, they're going to be relevant the entire season because, you're going to find out, you're going to want to watch every game to see where your quarterback positions, what you're going to be doing a quarterback for the future, running back and all that kind of stuff. You can see Kayvon Thibodeaux and Neal on both sides of the ball. Giants may not be relevant record-wise this year in some ways, but they are going to be relevant throughout the year because you're going to see a lot of things that you want to see throughout the year. And, it feels – that feels different, and in some ways it feels better because I hate the fact that we've been in seasons when we've been irrelevant while baseball's still going on. I think we'll be able to watch them, and you guys will have plenty of stuff to be discussing on your show, Big Blue Avenue, which is on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern over there on the Review and Preview Sports Network, and that kicks off, and we will definitely be tuning into that for another season over there. But Tom Scavetta joining us from Review and Preview and Big Blue Avenue, great friend and a great part of the show here today. Tom, thanks so much, and maybe we'll catch up during the season, and I'll definitely see you over there on Review and Preview for sure.
Absolutely, Johnny, Hank. Thank you both so much for having me. Appreciate the time to come on and talk about the New York Giants. And hey, let's go Big Blue.
Big Blue, yes, that's it. Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
See you guys.